Every time you open your mouth and talk, you're public speaking. And when you start to sort of mindset shift to this idea of nothing in the world is a presentation, everything is a conversation. And by the way, you have those all day long, every day. My goal is often to move people from presentation mode to conversation mode.
Our ever-changing world calls upon the most courageous, resilient, and relentless of us to face its most extraordinary challenges. To help you embark on this journey, we present the Impactful Coaching Podcast, your oasis for inspiration and a beacon to spark the fires of greatness within you. I'm Joseph. I will be your ally in this journey to empower your potential. Join us each week as we dive deep into the heart of ambition, drive, and success to unravel compelling stories of daring leaders who dreamed, struggled, and achieved victory. Our journey begins now. How's everybody doing today? My name is Joseph, and thank you once again, unless this is your first time, which is thank you for joining us on the Impactful Coaching Podcast. Our job is to bring to the world the exposure and the ideas that coaches have. Doesn't mean trying to improvise a new introduction. You kind of get where I'm going.
Yeah,
So
take two. You're good.
I'm gonna be a big boy. I'm gonna leave it in. I want people to see that I'm not perfect. But our job is we want to bring coaches onto the program because we want to show other coaches what the industry is capable of, and along the way inspire people to maybe help one another. I've been in media for 10 years, even if it didn't necessarily show, and my job is to help people use web media to the best of their abilities. So with that, I'm here with Robin Sachs of robinjsachs.com, public speaking coach, professional speaker, confidence coach, and author. First things first, before we do question one, I don't even know if this is question zero, it's like question -1. How are you doing today? How are you feeling?
Question zero, I will answer by going, yeah, doing well, doing very well. And thank you, because I already, Joseph, appreciate you totally in this space by just going, just leave it in. Let's just keep going. Because one of the things we'll probably get to today, by the way, is please stop trying to be perfect in life as a human being. So I'm sure we'll get to that, but thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Anytime. I have been accused of being a perfectionist before, and I said, no, I'm not a perfectionist. I'm just a don't screw this uptionist. It's just this idea of like, look, I don't need it to be perfect, but my ability to accept something as it feels like, oh no, this is a flaw. No, this is a flaw. No, this is a flaw. This is a flaw. And then by the end of it, okay, now it actually does perceive to be the work of a perfectionist. So it's the dichotomy of how we approach it and how we frame it is something that I expect us to get into today as well. So the first thing that we have to do, and you've done this probably numerous times, it's not something that I can necessarily go a podcast without. So let's start by telling the audience, what you do, what you're up to these days.
All right, fantastic. So I'm Robin Sachs. I like to call myself a confidence coach because pretty much 99% of what I do comes back to confidence. And how do you feel less stressed and more confidence when you're doing things in life? Because those are two of the things that either we're trying to get away from or we're trying to strive for more. And they're completely interconnected. And we'll talk a bit about how that looks. But my space is mainly in public speaking, executive presence, leadership, those types of things. So I work with individual clients. I work with companies of all kinds, corporate trainings, things like that, really around executive presence, public speaking. Anytime it's your turn to speak, whether it's a one-on-one conversation to 5,000 people in an auditorium, how do you communicate effectively and feel comfortable with you, whoever you're talking to, your message? And how do you have less stress and more confidence and get people what they need so they can go do amazing things in the world?
And how do you feel you would describe what separates you from other speakers? And the reason why that question is important is because my estimation, and kind of based off how many people I've talked to, is that speaking is the bread and butter of what a lot of people bring to the industry, because it's representative of other industries, right? Because you can be in textiles, you can be in data, you can be in anything, and you need to speak on behalf of that industry. So it's definitely an important role that a lot of people need to fill. But how do you uniquely approach filling that role?
I love that. And that's why instead of calling myself all the time a public speaking coach,
sure,
I decided to make a point to say I'm a confidence coach, because there are so many areas in life where that is. When it comes to things like speaking, though, because to your point, Joseph, every one of us is in the speaking business. no matter what you do. Whether you're somebody who answers a phone regularly as a job, you're in the speaking business. Whether you're somebody who talks to clients, you're in the speaking business. If you're working the counter at McDonald's, you're in the speaking business anytime you're communicating. So public speaking to me, and this is something that I like from a mindset standpoint to kind of separate what I do from maybe what a public speaking training would do, is every time you open your mouth, you're public speaking. So the first thing to do is to stop thinking necessarily about, wait, if I give a presentation, I'm speaking, or if I have to get up in front of the meeting, I'm speaking. As if I'm in front of the room and people are looking at me, I'm speaking. If I have a PowerPoint behind me, I'm speaking. Yes. However, every time you open your mouth and talk, you're public speaking. And when you start to sort of mindset shift to this idea of nothing in the world is a presentation, everything is a conversation. And by the way, you have those all day long, every day. My goal is often to move people from presentation mode to conversation mode, and to, again, help them show up. And anytime you're opening your mouth, I want you to just have less stress and more confidence. And there are so many different ways that can look, but I don't like just saying, hey, let's learn how to be a better public speaker. Let's learn how to give better presentations. There are wonderful coaches and companies and everything out there that are great at helping get better presentations and do great public speaking. Me, I like to take a completely separate mindset approach. And so everything I do is based on what's happening in here first, because everything starts and ends here. And if we don't have control of this, if we don't manage what's happening here, it's going to be really difficult to manage anything else. And so I believe this is step one, which makes step 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 20 much easier. Typically, if I teach you about presentations and I teach you about public speaking, we've already jumped to step 3 or 4, and we've missed the key that's going to allow you to get there faster. So that's how I look at this. It's so much more a mindset shift than just let me show you how to do this better.
So a couple of things that I wanted to say in response to that. First, you might find this particularly amusing, but I don't get to do it every day, but I do work in the film and TV industry as a background actor. And so our job is very specifically to look like we're speaking. But if we actually speak, we get into tremendous amounts of trouble because our dialogue is picked up by the microphone, and then they either have to keep the clip in and then they have to pay us and give us union membership, which is why some people will deliberately try to speak. But for the most part, you're not supposed to speak. But what I thought to myself as I even consider that is, well, okay, even if it's my job just to look like I'm speaking, in order to enhance my experience there and to connect with other people, I still have to talk to other people. So there's a great deal of dialogue and conversation that happens in between takes. It's just the irony of like the actual job itself is you shut your mouth or we're kicking you off set.
Right.
I also wanted to ask this early on because I feel like it's really important to help set the impact and really the seriousness of it. But from your experience, how seriously do you feel like stress needs to be taken as an issue that needs to be worked on and resolved, and find that balance to use it correctly?
I liked how you just said to use it correctly, because we always look at stress as bad.
Yep.
There are some benefits to stress. There's actually, we don't need to deep dive here, but this is something of interest. If anyone's interested, go and look up what's called Eustress. It's Eustress, and it's the positive effects and benefits of stress. There's an entire wing of stress, even in our everyday lives. For example, if we didn't have things like deadlines, nothing would ever get done, right? There are things that are stressors because they make us take action and make us do things. Those are positive stressors because those make us go do things, and wonderful things can happen from that. But from the not really healthy stress standpoint, two things, Joseph, that I think are really important to understand. Because again, I like to take it back to, let's go back to some basics or jumping into, so what do we do about it? Or what is it? How can we use it better? As a confidence coach, here's something that's really important to know. If you put stress and confidence on a seesaw, so stress is over here, let's say, and confidence is over here. Here's what happens, because stress and confidence are completely intertwined. When our stress levels go up, our confidence naturally is going to come down. When our confidence goes up, our stress level is naturally going to come down. So what tends to happen is it's really easy to have stress, nerves, anxiety, worry, overwhelm, fear, all of those things kick us up on the stress side all day. I mean, every day. There are things that are happening that can potentially be stressful, or we interpret them to be stressful. So most people are walking around with stress level up high, confidence level down low. And even when it evens out, it tends to go here. It doesn't usually go here, which is why it's so hard sometimes to feel like I'm in control, right? I'm always feeling like I'm reacting instead of responding, or I'm, reacting instead of being proactive. And even if I have moments of this, for most people, it's like, yes, but the other shoe drops or something. And this tends to keep going back up. So what tends to happen with stress is we focus so much on stress management. How do I get this side down? And one of the things that I would invite and encourage people to start thinking about, and we can talk about some ways to do that, if you don't focus so much on the stress, but instead you focus on how can I bring my confidence up, doing these things will naturally bring that stress level down. And so when you're thinking about how do I get less stressed and more confident, those are two things that impact one another. And there are two completely different things you can do in any given moment or any time to affect one or both of those things pretty quickly. The reason that, when stress takes over, that we do want to get it back down, at least to a manageable place, is we know now, quantifiably, we know that, what do they say, like 80% of chronic illness is stemming from stress. That is how much. Heart rate is way too up. All of the vitals are way too up, right? Inflammation, way too up. All of those things are created and caused by stress. And so being able to bring those things down even a little bit is helpful. And even if you think of the words we use, I get revved up, but I can calm down, right? Everything, right? My breathing when I'm stressed is way up. When you're calm, it's down. So the key is when stress is up here, it's taking over. And the reason we call it stress management instead of stress elimination, to your point, we don't have to get rid of stress. You can actually use it and develop a great working relationship with it. If it's here, I'm out of control. If I can find a way to get it here, I can manage my stress here. I don't need to get rid of it. So going from here to here is a lot easier than going from here to, I think, having to go all the way down to nothing. So balancing that out in that way and remembering it's stress management. The third thing about stress that I'll just mention to sort of think about is we create a ton of our stress. We create it by very much reacting to things instead of responding to things. We are the ones revving ourselves up more often than not with our thoughts and what we're thinking and what we're thinking is going to happen or not happen. Or again, we can talk about self-talk and all those kinds of things, the little bully in your head that's up there being critical all the time. We often are the ones that are revving ourselves up and pulling our confidence down and pushing our stress up. And so when you learn some ways to everyday practice that, or even in the moment, here's how you can start to switch that right now. Oh, you gain a lot more control of this. And this feels a lot better than this. And then you can work your way up to this.
I will for sure ask you about some of those skills. That to me seems like something that I'd love to chamber towards the end of the episode, because that's when you want to fit in more of like the action items. So I'm making a point to definitely want to cover those. Now, one thing that I started doing on this program, and this is slightly for fun, slightly for the sake of perspective, is to ask the experts on how to define something as we understand it now rather than maybe the last time we looked it up in the dictionary. So how would you define confidence as we understand it here in 2023?
Absolutely. So here's what confidence is. Confident people are not in control of the situation all the time. Good luck with that. Confident people aren't in control of other people. Good luck with that. Confident people are in control of themselves. No matter what is going on, no matter who's in the room, no matter what's happening. Confident people are in control of themselves. Everything can be done better when you are in control of you. You can respond easier, you can think more clearly, you can take action, you can know when to stop talking, you can know when to stop doing. All of those things can be done in that moment. And that's what confidence is to me, when you're in control of you.
Well, thank you for that. So, man, there's I'm having that same like kid in the candy store feeling because there's a lot of different things that I wanted to unpack. The last bit of like housekeeping question that I want to do while we're still early on in the conversation too is because one thing you mentioned right before we started recording is that you've been in my shoes, sort of. You've been an interviewer. You've worked in television media, so the backstory side of it is something that I want to hear as well. I'd love to hear like what were you up to and what were the skills that you were developing that joined you as you entered into the coaching space?
I spent about 6 years in television news. I had worked for a sports program for about a year and a half previous to that. Started as a producer, director, some behind the scenes stuff, ended up doing some more on air stuff, and ended up loving the on air stuff. And looking back as a theater kid and that kind of thing, I knew I didn't want to act necessarily, but there was something about getting in front of people and being able to say something and have them go, wait a minute, you just made me feel something, or you just made me look at something differently, or made me think something. And that whole human behavior piece where you could say something or pause or let something land or do something and get responses out of other people that took them to another place. There was something about that I absolutely adored. And as I was trying to figure out what it was, I ended up doing some broadcasting work, ended up getting into some internships. A couple of those turned into job offers. And I spent a few years in front of the camera as a reporter for an NBC affiliate, and then moved to an anchor, and then moved on before I left the industry by choice as an executive producer and host of a weekly, like a magazine type program for one of the networks I was working with. And what was happening was, as I spent my time in the industry, loved it. I got amazing experience. I met people just of all kinds from all over the world. All day, just the education from a human standpoint was amazing. The thing that I really had a challenge with, as somebody who's a fairly positive thinking person, the negative bent. And there is a whole psychology to how news is presented. Why? Pick your poison. It doesn't really matter. There are bents to things, and there's a psychology to it. And one of the things that I was always sort of fighting against was this idea that everything had to be looked at from the negative standpoint. And what I started doing is, my last couple of years in the industry, because I was on air and known in the area, I was asked to do, like MC a local event or a charity thing, that kind of stuff. And what I started doing, I think, to keep my own sanity at that point, was I would talk about things like, hey, let me tell you a secret about news, okay? Don't listen to what they're saying without listening to what they're not saying. So, for example, the weather guy is always going to tell you it's partly cloudy. But what does it have to be if it's partly cloudy? It has to be partly sunny, but he'll always tell you it's partly cloudy. Just like he'll always tell you there's a 20% chance of rain. And people go, oh, great, I got to take an umbrella, it's going to rain. He'll never tell you there's an 80% chance of sun. Right? The anchor at the desk will say there's a 10% unemployment rate. He or she will never say, today we have 90% employment. That's an A. I don't care what school system you're from in this country. There's a psychology as to how things are said, and it's always about what could go wrong, what is going wrong, what might go wrong. And no judgment, just awareness. When you start listening to everything in life and looking at it and going, this is one side of it, here is the other side, and you start to give yourself both sides of the story, you find it a lot easier to write this because you're not always feeling this. You can start here instead of starting here. And so what started happening was, again, I was just doing that to kind of vent a little bit. Mm-hmm. And what I noticed is anytime I would do that, I would have a couple dozen people come up to me and say, I never thought about that. That thought just changed a whole bunch of things for me, because I realized I've been stuck sitting here and I never just went, yes, and this is happening too. Why don't I focus here instead of focusing here? And all of a sudden, people would get back to me and say, by the way, I tried this thing. And guess what? I realized I know where I get my stress and I know where I get my energy. And I've realized I spend most of my life focusing on where I get my stress, not where I get my energy. And that started me thinking about, wait a minute, you mean people don't just think that way naturally? Because it's odd when we think a certain way, we just assume, well, that's how everybody looks at stuff, right? And I started to realize that that wasn't how a lot of people look at the world. And that was a way I looked at the world. And I thought, wait a minute, I gotta share this with more people. This is cool to me. This is fun. This keeps you much more in control of you. And a lot of people are saying, I just feel so out of control all the time. How do I get this to them? And that's when I started thinking, all right, well, what does this look like? How do I share this with the world? How do I monetize it? What is this? Is this a business? I don't even know how to do this. And so I ended up by choice leaving the news industry, came back home to, which happened to be Cleveland, and came back to a 9 to 5 job at a credit card company, answering phones, and thought, let me get some stability and a paycheck while I figure out what does this look like. My first aha moment was I wasn't even halfway into the first day in corporate America, and I went, whoa, this is not for me. This is not good. I got to get out of here fast. And so I just started finding any place I could find who was looking for somebody to come in and talk, to a networking group, to a chamber of commerce, everybody who's always looking for speakers, and they weren't going to pay, but it was get me in front of groups for half hour, 45 minutes, and let me start sharing some of this stuff. And I'm going to let it tell me what it's going to look like. Because then people will be able to tell me what resonated, what didn't, what do they care about, whatever. And after a few months of doing a handful of those, I realized, wait a minute, this can be something. This can be a business. This is a mindset thing that I can bring out to the world and help people with. And I spoke for free in front of every audience for about a year. And I'll never forget the first time I got a phone call and they said, somebody in our organization saw you at a recent speaking thing. We have a convention in September in Atlanta. We want you to come and do one of the keynotes. What do you charge? And I was like, I don't know. And it was like, wait a minute. And so I fumbled my way through you know what, give me some details. Let me get back to you by end of business day with a proposal. And I hung up the phone and I called everyone I ever have known in my life that I had any clue spoke in front of anybody ever. And I said, what do I charge? I have no clue. And they asked some questions about expenses and things like that. And I got a range of prices and I picked the price in the middle, the number in the middle. And as I'm sending the email back to this person, I'm thinking, nobody's going to pay me to go talk about this stuff. And I hit send, and 10 minutes later, I had a response and it said, okay, perfect. We'll start sending travel arrangements to you. Put it on your calendar. And it blew my mind. And it was at that point, because it's most of the time, we don't know the value we bring to other people. Other people know it. We question it. We second guess it. We doubt it. We're like, that's not that big a deal. Nobody's going to pay for that. That's not going to work. Or we listen to other people who say that sometimes to us. Listen to the people who are saying, I need what you're offering. I do need that. That is helpful to me. I see the value in that. And go start working with them. And all of a sudden, 20 years later, here we are still speaking, doing motivational speaking, doing coaching, doing keynotes, doing corporate trainings, doing one-on-one coaching, all of those kind of things. And so I sort of let it show me what it was going to be. But that's how I went from a negative industry, that there were some wonderful things that I experienced out of that, but had no interest in doing that anymore, and shifted it to, here's what I need to go do in the world.
It's a privilege to be able to hear that story face to face. And it, although I went through a little bit of a mini arc throughout the program, which is, I'm talking to a lot of coaches, makes me want to do a coach. You know what? Okay, never mind. I'm 10 years in what I'm doing. But I have been a public speaker. Going up through elementary school, I won a few awards. Basically, the only awards I won in school, because I sure wasn't an athlete with public speaking. So now I'm thinking, like, I wonder, like a community center or just somewhere I can go and just talk in front of people. Right? Write that down. So that's one takeaway. We're not even 30 minutes in, so thank you for that. I'm thinking about that for real. I had to say something on the subject of news media and its inherent negativity because as an alternative media junkie, I get
Yeah.
my news, balanced news. I hear both sides, but from alternative media sources. So I've always been a supporter of the kind of work that I'm also trying to accomplish. So it wasn't until I went to go visit my parents for the first time in probably about 6 months that they put on the 5 p.m. local news here in Toronto, and you just go into shock seeing what like our top stories: flooding, war, inflation, COVID, local soccer team pulls a
Right.
miracle win out. Like, oh, good for the soccer team. A little bit of calamine lotion right at the end there, but it
Right.
just the idea of just like, hearing that every day, that that definitely is a major stressor, and it makes you feel like the world is not as in control as it is. And
Yeah.
so I'm just like, I'm supporting what you obviously must have experienced much more innately, being there and doing that work. So but as for like the why it's so negative, you got me thinking about why it is like this. And there's some easy answers, like, well, it sells, right? It draws attention. And yeah, that's true. But Game of Thrones is fictional, but that also sells. Like The Walking Dead is fictional, but that sells. Why do stories sell? And the reason why is because you don't read a story until the bad things start to happen, because you're watching characters overcome these issues. So yeah, I mean, in the course of a story, there will be moments of levity and characters enjoying their lives if it's more of like a year in the life, or if it's a long-term thing. But those short-term, like airport novels, they start off with somebody getting murdered and it doesn't end until you figure out who the murderer was. So it's just the nature of storytelling, I think. And I obviously would defer to your expertise on this, but I think the trouble is that you hear the catalyst, but you don't hear about the people overcoming it. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I don't know. But like, was there ever that like that sense of you were conveying an arc, and you heard about the good news that came out of the bad news as well?
Sometimes that's it. And, I'll take what you said, Joseph, about storytelling. And here's, in my experience and opinion, my educated opinion
Yes,
is,
yes.
when, think about this, when something happens, no matter what it is, there are the facts of what happened, right? X happened. That's it. That's what happened. But here's the thing. Let's say you and I both own news stations, okay? And we both get that initial information from something like an AP Newswire or somewhere that brings information into places, right? There's a handful of places that are kind of the here's what's happening kind of places.
Hmm.
So let's say you and I both pull a story that's the same story off of AP Newswire. We now have the same information, correct?
Yep.
However, the news business isn't about educating. The news business is a business. And so here's what now you and I have to do. If we have the same information and we put the same information out there, neither of us is going to stand out. It doesn't matter which channel somebody goes to. However, if we have the same information and I sit down with my news department, my marketing department, and all of the promotions team and go, okay, what do we need to do? How do we tell this story so that we get people here watching, looking? Because then I can say, hey, I can hand the rate sheet this month to my sales team and they can go out and say, here's our rate sheet because Robin had 50,000 viewers for that program. Joseph only had 25,000. That's how you make money. That's the business. And so you have to start storytelling, because if we just think about, you go back to, I don't know about you, but I remember when I was like a little kid, you'd be watching a TV show. If there was something big going on, a newscaster would come in and say, hey, here's what we know. Here are the facts. We will come back when we know more facts. And then they'd go back to your show. We don't do that anymore. And again, I'm going to say no judgment, just awareness. Be very aware of this. I have now an hour and a half before the next hour and a half show comes on, before the next 3 hour show comes on, and we all have to fill that time, and we better keep those viewers. So I have got to storytell. If I just give you the facts, I'm out, I'm done. And I send you somewhere else. It's like right when you have a website and you click, you want to keep them on your website. Don't send them off of the site. It's the same thing. Once I've got you, I've got to keep you, because if not, they're going to go to you. And I don't want that. So there's that psychological, I have to stay. And that's why you see things a lot of times in the background. What's happening is I might have more information, but I'm only going to give you enough information to be a little irate or wonder. I'm not lying to you. I'm just not giving you everything. So that's one way to do this. I'm going to keep it with you. And then I can slowly drip things in so you feel psychologically like I got to stay here to get more because they keep giving me a little more. I'm being informed, right? Or go get this interview as opposed to that interview. And let's put that one on. Well, now you have half the story, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't lie to you, but I only gave you half the story. So those are all kinds of things. And I'm going to call them tactics because they are. Take that as a negative, a positive. I don't care what you call them. There are so many different ways to make sure my business does well. And you're going to do things to make your business do well. If we have the same info, we got to find ways to make that info sound and look different. If you watch, let's say, a football game in the States, right? I'm going to watch a football game. I'm going to watch a Cleveland Browns game. Here's what happens at the end of the game or during really challenging plays or when there's uncertainty about something, right? Here's what happens. And this is very intentional because this keeps our brains really engaged, is the director of that television broadcast is going to be telling the camera people, okay, somebody find me despair. Somebody find me despair. And that camera person's job is to go find somebody going, oh, or looking like, are you kidding me? And then they're going to go find me joy, find me joy, find me happy. And then they're going to be like, yeah. And you're going to notice a balance of those things. That is that human emotion, pull me in, find despair, find happy, and going back and forth. And that is all strategy. That is very intentional with all of this stuff, which is fascinating when you look at it and think about it, because you see it then everywhere. You see it constantly. And the biggest challenge with it, Joseph, is, at least in the States, you can't walk into a McDonald's without a big flat screen TV. And of course, news is always on, and it always says breaking news in bright red. I don't care what channel you're on. And if you listen, you always have an anchor basically saying, we don't know what's happening. We don't have any new information. We have no facts. We don't even know if this situation is going on, but we're here for the next 4 hours because our graphics team has put this wonderful thing together. We're going to bring 14 other people on over the next hour who also have no clue what's happening. And all we do is, the strategy is bring people with 5 different takes on, because one of them is probably going to be right, even if it's a fluke, if we cover every base. And then 3 hours from now, the promotions department can put a little thing together saying, you heard it here first. We were right. It's all a joke. It's this game. And it is, the problem is because we're surrounded with it and we don't even realize how surrounded with that thinking we are all the time, that's how we as individuals begin to look at the world and begin to think. We're always about what's going to go wrong, what could go wrong, and we stop. And we never look at the other side of the story. Yes, this can exist, but so can this. Half the story, if you only have half the story, you don't have the story. And I could talk about stuff for days, as you know, just from hearing this, I'm sure. So I will stop and pass it back to you for the moment.
So I just have a little bit more that I wanted to say on this, and then I want to jump into the discussion about the inner bully, because I feel like that's the beast in the room that I want to go after today. So recency bias in full effect. I cooked like a couple of really good Indian dishes, and now I think of myself as a decent chef, and that ended giving me a newfound interest in Hell's Kitchen. Now they put out quite a bit of content online, and they had like the hyper edited one that's very in line with what we were discussing, but then they also have an unedited version where you're just watching the cameras follow Chef Ramsay around as he tries to manage both teams. And the
Okay.
comments love it. They love that they're just watching it unfold the way it's naturally unfolding, and the context is dictating the story because everything is set up for them to either succeed or fail. Either they get the food right, and Gordon is temporarily happy, or they get it wrong, and he rips into people, which I didn't like at first because we're talking about negativity and bullying and all that. But then you kind of get that like it's a roast act. It's almost like a badge of honor to get ripped into by him. So
Right.
it kind of goes into just like hearing those words and appreciating them in the right context. And I laugh my head off now. So the reason why I brought that up is just because it just shows that we do want to, stories are just going to happen. It's a part of the human condition, and that people do respond to things happening naturally and organically. And it is engaging, and it can be exciting to watch.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and then sorry, the other thing I was gonna say, just because the idea of like a bunch of news anchors getting on and quite literally say we have no idea what's happening. Like I'm pretty sure the Onion did it, but I need to dig up through the archives and see if there's like a full on like our top story today. We have no idea, and here are 5 panels, all who have no idea. One of them might get it right. Like it's just such a perfect Onion prep, and it's too bad they don't accept pitches.
Love it. The Onion's phenomenal. I also love when I'll just put this out there, big picture, when politicians grab headlines and stuff, and it's like, dude, that's the Onion. Do you not never mind. Just never
Yeah.
mind. You either get it or you don't, but you just helped me prove a point. So that's okay. Thank you. I love
So
that.
it's oh man, every so often it blows my mind how poignant it is. Anyways,
Yeah.
so let's talk about the inner bully. Now, I'm
Okay.
gonna put myself in the crucible here because I like to make this show a little bit about me, but no, just a little bit about me. So I have lots of friends, and obviously most of my friends are guys, and guys we like to mess with each other, like we like to pull pranks, we like to make fun. And if I were to set a new standard where I would like, I'm not going to be around people like that anymore, well, I would just basically be around nobody. And then I go out to find a new group of friends, and then it just happens again. It's just part of life. And if I were to like watch myself, from a fifth dimensional point of view, I'd be a prick too. So I'm guilty, right? So that's the setup for this. But sometimes I wake up in the morning, and the first thing on my mind is something that had happened last night, and I'm like, I thought I was over this, and there it is, and it's so strong, and I have no idea how to stop it, or if stopping it is even the point, or if the point is to just kind of like let it flow. So I think part of what makes the inner bully so strong is that it seems like it's in control. So I'd like to hear your take on that, and how maybe we can regain some of that control, or if maybe gaining control is the issue, and maybe we're actually supposed to kind of relinquish control, and we have to kind of feel our way through these emotions.
Yeah, so great question. And this is
Thank you.
the great thing about this question, and thank you for giving a personal example of that. I have to tell you, in literally working with thousands of people from all walks of life, all different types of people, here is something that is simply human. Young, old, male, female, I don't care if you're an entry level sales kid, if you're the CEO, every human being has that voice in their head. Down here, we call it things like nerves and anxiety. Up here, we call it imposter syndrome. There's a whole bunch of different things we like to call it with terms. It is essentially that thing in our head that always is second guessing things, or holding on to things and not letting go, and always probably telling you you did it wrong, or you should have done something different, or whatever. It never has anything nice to say. And what's happening there, again, at the very foundation of what that is, that negative self talk voice, or that inner bully, that critical thing in your head, whatever you want to call it, the reason that's there is because your brain's job is not to keep you happy. Your brain's job is to keep you safe. That is your brain's job. And so here's what happens. If you go back to caveman days, back in caveman days, you're sitting in your cave doing whatever, a big animal walks by, you see the animal sees you, and in that moment, your brain hijacks your body because your brain goes, danger, because you're about to get eaten by this animal. And it essentially hits a panic button in your body. And the second your brain senses danger, what it does is several things start to happen. One, your breathing often gets high and shallow, right? Depending on the situation, all your blood rushes from all your nice, vital, warm organs out to your extremities so you can get ready to fight or flight, right? Which is why we call it that. Your logical thinking completely shuts down because when there is a threat to your safety, as far as your brain's concerned, you don't have time to think. You can't sit back and go, well, I could run or I could hang out and sit here. You don't have time. So your brain doesn't allow that to happen, which is why sometimes when we're really stressed and we're in fight or flight, we can't access stuff that we already know. Right? If you're speaking, it might be I've practiced that 100 times, and now when faces are looking at me, I can't remember what I was going to say. But as soon as you walk out of the room, you do. Or you were in a situation, in a conversation, and you walk out of a room, and 5 minutes later you go, why didn't I just say this? Or why didn't I ask that question? It's because in the moment, your brain shut your logical thinking down. Until you're out of fight or flight, you're not going to be able to go, oh, well, yeah, why didn't I just do that? So several of those things happen instantly when our brain senses danger. But here's the challenge today in 2023. Back then, that response saved our lives. Today, we still have fight or flight because if there is a true threat to our safety, we want that response kicking in, no question. The problem today that is prevalent with human beings, our brains today can't always tell the difference between a threat to our safety and a threat to our self-esteem. So what's happening is whether somebody outside of us says something or does something and we're like, ooh, ow, that hurt, that wasn't cool, right? It makes us feel instantly crappy. And we start thinking, was I really that? Did I say that? Was I really mean about that? Did I what? And we start second guessing it and questioning it. Or more often than not, we're doing that to ourselves because that voice is constantly going, why were you such a jerk? Why'd you say that? Wait, what did he mean by that? Wait, why did she do that? Wait a minute. And it's constantly looking back, trying to complete the picture. It's going back, going, I have a little uncertainty. I'm not going to let go of that until we have safety. In other words, I understand it completely. But with most of life, there is uncertainty sometimes. I don't know it completely. I don't have the answer. And so that voice is trying to keep us safe by constantly going, well, what if? What if they meant this? What if this happened? Wait, did you actually do this? Wait a minute. What if this doesn't work? What if this goes wrong? And it's constantly bringing that stuff in because your brain is trying to keep you safe. The problem is that voice is a horrible communicator. Mm-hmm. And it's always giving you half the story. And it's always the bad half, the negative half, the critical half, and the half that's going wrong, or even if nothing's going wrong, it wants to keep you safe. So it's going to create scenarios. What if it does go wrong? What if this happens? And we can what if ourselves to death sometimes. And it's almost like that voice doesn't stop sometimes. It's even chirping and talking sometimes when we're having a totally different conversation. Or like the example you brought up, maybe it's something I wasn't even thinking about, but at some point it comes up and now I'm kind of stuck on it. And it's like, why can't I just let that go? There are some different ways to start to manage that voice or manage that conversation in your head. You don't need to quiet it. The key is, one, we need to even sometimes ask, is what that voice saying, is it even true? Is it even valid? What are the facts, right? Become a journalist in your head, a good journalist. What are the facts? Just the facts. Because most of what that voice is doing is making things up. It's storytelling constantly. And if you're working with the story instead of the facts, it can tell you stories all day long. And the thing is we start to not question that. And that's why we start feeling the way we do. Because we're like, wait a minute, did I? Is that true? So we don't validate it or invalidate it, which makes us start to second guess it, to start to doubt it, to start to question it. And that's just starts a spiral. When you don't stop those thoughts, they keep going. It's like water down a drain. You have one or two of those thoughts, and now you have 5, and now you have 10, and now you feel so out of control because your stress level's up here, and I'm really anxious or whatever it is I'm feeling. Thinking is never going to bring stress down. Thinking is always going to bring stress up. So it's about managing the conversation in your head because everyone has it. And I'll give you a perfect analogy of this. If you walk into a room, and let's say there's 100 people in the room we're in, and we put them all together, and we take a picture of that group together. We print the picture out, start passing it around. 100 people will do exactly the same thing. They get the picture, and out of 100 people, who will they look at?
either the person they're most attracted to or themselves.
Yeah, yeah. Most
Yeah.
likely themselves
Yeah.
instantly is the first thing. And what are the thoughts we're going to have about looking? Because by the way, 99 other people don't even exist. That's how self-focused we are, right? It's like we put a spotlight on ourselves and we feel like we're walking around in the world and everyone's looking at us. Nobody even knows you're in the room, by the way, which is the funny part. So we look at ourselves, 99 people don't exist. And usually the first thought we have when we look at ourselves is, something negative or critical, right? Ew, why did I wear that shirt? What's with my hair? Oh, God, I hate my smile. Right? Oh, we don't give ourselves a chance. But if we look at everyone else, we typically go, oh, that's a nice picture of everyone. That's how self focused and self critical we are. The reality is, nobody is ever thinking about you what you're thinking about you. As a matter of fact, nobody outside your head is probably even thinking about you because they're too busy in their own head thinking what everyone's thinking of them. That's the funny part or the irony about this that sometimes can help to go, wait a minute, I'm not the center of everyone's attention. I'm not the center of the world. Let me get back to focusing on what I do need to do or want to do or things that help me or whatever, instead of just spending so much of my time and energy going, what is everyone thinking of me? That's exhausting, right? And we get into those self-focused, self-talk places. It's easy to get in there. So there are ways to get out of that. And that's the key. And I can share 2, 3 ways to really start to look at this differently and literally instantly start managing that conversation in your head much differently, where you feel more in control than out of control.
I would personally love to hear them, and I just wanted to point out that this is the first time I visualized it this way. But when a fella like myself wakes up and I'm immediately thinking these things, the idea of it being like a news broadcast, it's almost like and then you think about like how my parents feel every time they watch the news and they go into shock and they're stressed out for hours and they need to regulate. There's a great book somebody talked to in a previous show called Unleash Your Primal Brain by Tim Ash. Highly recommended. He talks about some of the stuff that you talk about, how like our brain wants us to be safe and only happy a bit just to keep us motivated, right? So it's fascinating stuff. But yeah, just the idea like what my inner audience, what my inner cells are thinking when the broadcaster, the storyteller, really the face of the operation is saying all of these things and is only focusing on the negative side of it. So it's really fascinating. I never really thought of it that way. But yeah, I'm dying to hear these techniques.
So I'll give you a couple of things. So first of all, one has to do with simple perspective shift, because I'm always going to start with control what you can control first. We spend so much of our lives feeling a little out of control or stressed or anxious or however you'd like to term it, because we spend so much time focusing on things we have no control over. We spend so much time and energy looking and thinking about things we have no control over, right? Something as simple as the traffic, other people, right? Things happening in the world, right? Situations, whatever. Things I can't control is where we tend to get pulled and focus a lot of our time. So one of the first things to do, and I'm going to use this visual again to kind of start writing this seesaw and bringing some of this stress down. When we feel out of control, you're going to be highly stressed and anxious, no question. As you feel more in control, you're going to feel less stressed and less anxious. So the control piece is key here. So if I focus on things I can't control, there's nothing I can do. I'm going to be highly stressed and anxious. If I start to focus on things I can control, I can quickly pull myself down into that manageable place, which is much easier because now I can do things about it. I have control over some things. So that perspective shift that I am creating a lot of my stress. I'd never say 100% because there are difficult things in the world. There are challenging situations. There are difficult people. There are financial things and job things. There are things that really take our stress levels up legitimately. But we create a great deal of our stress. And we do this by doing one thing. We react to things instead of responding. And so I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm driving out on the highway, right? I'm on the freeway today and everything's perfectly fine. I'm in a good mood and somebody cuts me off and I have to slam on my brakes. At that moment, there are 2 possible ways to react and respond. Reaction, number 1, I slam on my brakes, I hit my horn, I start yelling, you run my gesture, all kinds of stuff. I might get so worked up I have to like pull up next to the person to stare at them, right? Stare them down. In that moment, we go from 0 to 60 with our stress. Nothing was happening, everything was fine. And like that, panic button got hit, and all of those things I described happened instantly. Heart rate up, breathing up, cannot think. I'm just in fight mode. That's it. Now, when that happens, all of those physical things happen. All the mental and physiological things happen. Your brain starts shooting out adrenaline, your brain starts shooting out cortisol. You are now instantly poised to completely blow up. Now, let's go back and take the second response, which is somebody cuts me off. I slam on my brakes and I go, glad I was paying attention. And I move on with my day. That's the difference between reacting and responding, because the person that caused my stress was not the person who cut me off. I hate to tell you. Mm-hmm. The person who just put me into fight or flight or kept me completely out of it was how I chose to react or respond to it. So those types of things happen in life regularly throughout the day. And if we're reacting to everything, we don't get out of fight or flight. We are living here, which is going to make us feel completely out of control. When we start responding to things and reminding ourselves, well, that sucked, but it happened, and there's nothing that we can do. Nothing happened. There's no accident. Nothing happened. Move on with your day. You forget about it like that. When you react, all of that is now embedded. It's like encoded in your brain, in your body, and it's coursing through your system for hours. Sometimes we can't let go of it, or like you said, to the next day, or for weeks, right? Or something mm-hmm. triggers it 3 years later and we bring something up and it's like, where did that come from? All of that is sitting in there somewhere because I grabbed it and chose to hold on to it instead of going, okay, let's deal with this, take care of it, nothing happened, it's fine, and just let it go. So one way is to start really paying attention and be aware. Notice when you're reacting, because most of the time we react, and it slowly builds all these levels up until we're right at the edge of fight or flight. And then some little silly thing kicks us over the edge. And it's like, that's not that big a deal. But to you, it feels like it's the biggest thing in the world. That's what's happening there. So the key to remember here is the difference between reacting and responding is one breath. When we react, we jump right in. Mm-hmm. So get in the habit of, before you decide to say something, before you open your mouth to talk, before you decide to take an action, sit back and take a breath. That space, that moment you just gave yourself, is the difference between reacting and responding. Here, I'm on autopilot and it's going to be out of control. Here, I've pulled myself off of autopilot. Now I can think for a moment and make a choice what I want to do, what I want to say. So that's why when somebody is really stressed or anxious, what do we tell them to do? All right, take a breath, take a deep breath. Yeah. Okay, now tell me what's going on. That space is key. There is power in that pause. So tool number one, begin to use that pause to your advantage, because the choice you make lives in that pause. So reacting, responding, start to think about that. And then notice when you do take a pause for a second and respond instead of react, I want you to notice how you feel. You're going to notice a big difference very quickly. And that's why when it goes back to confident people are in control of themselves, that's a huge piece to this. And if you watch people, when there's a really chaotic type of situation going on, you'll notice people running all over the place, just in the chaos, just being in the chaos, and they're just everywhere and there's no control. And you will notice people going, okay, you go there. Okay, we're going to stay here. Now you do this. There are people who are not in the chaos, but they are in the calm. And they're the ones that are able to think, to make things happen, to take care of something. They are the people who can do that. The difference is often one breath to determine whether you're part of the chaos or part of the calm. And another visual I'll give you on this, and then I have 2 more tools I want to share with you. if you see a big tree and it's a really windy day and you're focusing on the leaves are blowing all over the place. And if all you do is focus on the leaves, you're going to start getting amped up. You're going to get revved up because, oh my goodness, look at this wind. What if it gets stronger? Oh no, it looks almost like a hurricane. It's so much. It's not. What if branches fall? All this stuff. But if you just focus and look down the tree and focus every once in a while on the trunk is not moving. It's stable. No matter how windy it is, this isn't moving. And so where we choose to put our attention is where we're going to go. If you focus on chaos and stressful things, you're going to feel chaotic. Mm-hmm. If you focus on stable things that are centered, that are grounded, that are calm, that are stable, you will feel more calm and grounded and stable. So we go where our attention goes. Find the people or the situations that are grounded and start to use that breath and the power of the pause to become one of those people. How do you get yourself there for yourself and for others? So that's one thing. Another tool, and let's go directly to this self-talk. Give that self-talk voice, that negative voice, a name. And here's why that works a lot of the time. So let's say I call mine Bob, right? I use Bob for this example a lot. So by the way, don't name it someone you know, because that could come up with a lot of other baggage and stuff, but give it a name.
All right. Yeah, good to know.
So let's say, yep, definitely. So let's say my negative self-talk voice now I'm going to call Bob. Just because I named it, first of all, you're going to notice Bob talking a lot. You're going to notice when that Bob voice is there. And Bob, you will notice, is always telling you what's going wrong, what could go wrong, right? What's negative, how you're not good at things, how even though you think you have a handle on it, you might not be as good as you think. Bob is always going to be telling you that stuff. Bob's your inner bully. The problem is Bob is usually lying to you. But we don't often question Bob. So this tool helps you understand you don't have to believe everything you think just because you thought it. So now when Bob chimes in and Bob says, oh, you are so not going to get that job. You're not the best candidate. You can sit back. You can take a breath if you want, because that's pretty powerful. And you can go, you know what, Bob? I got as good a chance as anybody else. How about you go sit in the corner and be quiet? I got stuff to do right now. Or if you're trying to do something and Bob's like, ooh, look at how they're looking at you. They don't like what you're saying. What are they thinking of you? They probably think you're whatever, right? You can go, Bob, I'm guessing they're not thinking anything right now. How about you go sit down in the corner, keep quiet, and just chill? I don't have time for this conversation right now. You're allowed to tell Bob to go sit down in a corner and stop talking. And you can say it in whatever words you want. I won't get more vocal with words there, but you can say that as strongly as you need to or want to, depending on your take and your personality, your vocabulary. But you can tell Bob to go sit down and shut up because you got stuff to do. You don't have time for this. And you can always remind Bob, well, sure, I might not get the job, but guess what? I might, because that's the other side of the story. So until we know whether I got it or not, we don't need to discuss it, do we? It's a waste of time and energy. We'll know one way or the other. So thanks, go sit down in the corner and be quiet. What you'll start to find quickly is when you start to separate that voice from a voice that allows you to stand up for yourself a little in your own head. Mm-hmm. Sometimes for the first time, you realize how often Bob is lying. Bob's not bringing anything to the story. Bob is always giving you half the story. And Bob will start to get more and more quiet the more you do that. And sometimes Bob might say something that is valid, but you get to choose if it's valid or not. And if it's valid, you might go, yeah, you know what? We're not real good at that yet, but I'm working on that and doing a lot to improve on that. So thanks for the reminder, Bob. And now Bob stops talking because he's got nothing else to chirp about. So take control of that conversation in your head. Start to manage it by being able to respond to Bob to quiet him down. So that's another way to do it. Name the voice and manage it, because you're the author of all those thoughts, by the way. Don't let Bob pick up your pen. You don't need to hand Bob your pen all the time. You can take your pen back, tell Bob, go sit down, and you can turn the page. and write your new script in your head. You're allowed to do that. It's all you. So that's a power that you have. So another way to practice that. A third way to start again to change what's happening up here and really manage it and get a control of it is talk to yourself like you would talk to a friend or a colleague or a coworker, somebody that you like who's coming to you for advice. And here's why that works. For the most part, it is easy to look outside of ourselves and look at people and know what they should be doing. It's like we can fix everybody else. It's so simple. Why isn't he just doing this? Why doesn't she just say that? I don't understand. What's the problem? Just go do this. But when we look in the mirror with the same stuff, we're at a total loss. And so in our heads, if we start thinking about if a friend just thought that or said that to me, what would I say to them? Because we already know how to do this really well. We just don't do it with ourselves. So, you might have a friend who, let's say you're in a class, right? And the friend walks in and they have to present that day. Let's say it's their turn to do their report in front of the class or something, and or their business or whatever, or the team. And they walk in the room and they're like, oh my goodness, I'm probably not terribly prepared. I wish I would have prepared more now that I think about it. I have some stuff, but it's not good. And oh, my slides are probably awful. And everyone's going to hate this. And they're going to ask me questions I don't know. Oh, and I don't like speaking in front of people and all that. Those are legit things that go through heads. Now, you would never look at that person and go, yeah, you are so going to suck. You're going to blow this. You're probably going to get fired today. You're awful at this. We would never say that to somebody, unless maybe they were a super good friend. Then we would just maybe, for a little. But we wouldn't do that. We would instantly do the opposite. We'd go, okay, stop. You say that every time you have to do this, but you go in and do a good job. You don't have to know everything in the world. You know more than the people you're talking to. You're just sharing what you know. So get in and do it. Would you stop that? We'd almost get mad at them for beating themselves up. And instead, we'd remind them everything is fine. We would remind them it's good enough. We would remind them what they do well. And we would encourage them, just go do your best. Go do it. You got this. But we don't do that with ourselves. Instead, we beat ourselves up. Yeah, you're probably right, because we believe everything Bob tells us. I'm probably going to blow this. This is going to go awful. So the third skill to work on is start to talk to yourself like you talk to a friend. As you have those thoughts, as Bob's talking, if someone else said that to you, what would you say back to them? Because I guarantee more often than not, you have the answer to immediately switch that, which is pretty cool. So there are 3 ways to, again, start to really manage that voice up there, that self-talk, that bully. Because if you notice, the thing about bullies is if you just kind of let them keep bullying, they keep bullying. As soon as you stand up to them and you say something, now they can't control you anymore. The fun for a bully is gone and the bully goes away. Unfortunately, they go find someone else they can control. But stand up to the bully up there and the bully starts to get really quiet. So,
yeah, I'm not so sure whoever thought the idea of ignoring bullies was going to work. Like, I don't know about that one. Yeah.
That's not how it works.
Yeah, no.
Right? But the whole point of, you think of the whole point of a bully is truly an insecure person who needs to find people that they think that can make them feel better by kind of squashing them down a little bit. Notice bullies don't go attack people who are perfectly comfortable with themselves and fine and bigger than them. Bullies don't do that. Bullies are insecure people, psychologically speaking, which is why they need to go find people they can control that aren't fighting back. Because as soon as you stand up to a bully, guess what? You brought all those insecurities out. The bully's going to go find someone else. It's the same thing like, I hate to say it, things like reality TV. Sometimes reality TV is about watching other people fail and get yelled at and mess up and stuff, because in a very odd but real psychological way, that makes us feel a little better because they look a little ridiculous, right? They look like, why did they do that? Or, oh, I'm glad that's not me. It fills us with a little bit more security to watch that happening sometimes. And so there's a whole psychology to that either builds or helps bring down our insecurities as human beings. Bullies are some of the most insecure people in the world. Mm-hmm. That's why they don't pick on people who are like them or better than them. They only pick on people who they think they can control.
And heaven only knows that there are other ways for people to, develop self-confidence. And I never want to give a bully a credit, right? Because like, okay, if I can stand up to a person and I can become a better version of myself, I suppose I can thank the bully for being that catalyst. I just would never actually want to do that.
Exactly.
Robin, I know I gotta let you go though, because I know you have some other stuff you gotta do today. I'm truly grateful for your time and your expertise today. This was a fascinating listen to. It really came at a good time for me too. It's always nice when Providence says, listen to the right person at the right time. So if there's anything else that like any other reactions or observations that you made over the course of the episode, I did want to give you the floor for a few more minutes just in case you need it. So otherwise, let the audience know how they can learn more about you and find you online.
No, I appreciate it. And thanks again for the invite to share. I appreciate that, Joseph. An easy place to find me is on LinkedIn. If you want to follow, I share a lot of, tools, tips, kind of these little mindset shifts and things like that, articles, small videos, tips, stuff like that. Feel free. You can also connect with me there if that's something where that serves you or makes sense, or if I could be of value to you. Feel free. We can talk about how that could look as well. And yeah, I will say that's probably the easiest, quickest place. Yeah. So don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of value in some way.
Well, thank you once again. And to my audience, I'm going to see how long I can get away with saying this. A week ago, someone had reached out and wanted me to start helping him host a podcast. I'm like, oh, that's nice when I don't have to look for, for a change. And it made me realize what was my stake, what was my position in the industry. And it's, to simplify it, as I say, I'm helping people with web media. So anybody listening who either just wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn, feel free questions are always free to ask. So I'm happy to be of service in that regard. And if you see like a brand on my skin next time, it's because my producer prodded me and said don't do that. So we'll see if I get away with it. Other than that, this has been another episode of the Impactful Coaching Podcast, and it is our endeavor that in whatever way you are helping others, we want you to be impactful while you're at it.